Have you ever wondered what happens within the deepest layers of your psychological being when you suddenly sense that someone is thinking about you? When a message arrives from someone at the precise moment you were contemplating them, when there exists an alignment between your internal reflections and their external actions that extends far beyond mere coincidence. Very few individuals recognize that what most dismiss as random chance is actually a genuine psychological phenomenon that Jung identified as synchronicity, that non-causal connection between events that reveals a psychic reality far more profound than what our rational faculties can comprehend. That person you feel pulsating through your consciousness, who re-emerges in your existence precisely when you were preparing to release them, who seems to read your emotional state without a single word being spoken, isn't casually thinking of you, but is reaching out through a psychic frequency that transcends ordinary communication. Here lies the paradox that Jung never ceased exploring. The more deeply two individuals are interconnected at the level of the collective unconscious, the more synchronized their thoughts become, the more closely their destinies align, as if both were dancing to a melody that only they can perceive. Stay with me until the conclusion, because I will reveal 5 of the most extraordinary indicators suggesting that someone is reaching out to you through their thoughts. How to discern when this connection you're experiencing is authentic and not merely paranoia. And most importantly, I'll show you which of these indicators represents the most powerful evidence that you're connected at a soul level that is rarely understood. Here's something that few people openly share. There exist 5 highly specific markers that emerge when someone genuinely reaches out to you with their thoughts. 5 patterns of synchronicity that reveal a connection so profound that most individuals cannot even articulate what is occurring. Have you ever noticed there's an enormous difference between casually thinking about someone and having someone truly pulsating through your thoughts? This distinction is absolutely everything. When you understand the psychological mechanisms behind this silent calling, it transforms not only how you perceive connections in your existence, but also how you allow yourself to recognize when someone is genuinely seeking you on an invisible level. Let me provide context for how we arrived at this understanding, because it's immensely important for comprehending what we call the psyche. Throughout nearly the entire span of human history, indigenous cultures, spiritual traditions, and mystics understood that there exists a reality far beyond the boundaries of what 5 senses can perceive. There was a psychic existence, an existence of thoughts, an existence of intention that held genuine power over material reality. Modern science, however, in its hunger for rationality, completely dismissed this dimension of human experience as superstition or imagination. Jung was revolutionary because he didn't dismiss this reality. He observed his patients and saw patterns that couldn't be explained by ordinary causality. He saw individuals who dreamed of events that occurred several days later. He saw individuals who received information they couldn't have accessed through normal channels. And he developed the concept of synchronicity to explain what couldn't be explained by linear causality. Synchronicity isn't magic. It's a much deeper reality than magic, because it isn't based on manipulating forces, but on recognizing that consciousness and matter are interconnected in ways that transcend our usual understanding. When two individuals are connected at a deep psychological level, when genuine resonance exists between their souls, they begin sharing a field of consciousness that manifests through increasingly frequent synchronicities. The most common indicator suggesting that someone is calling you with their thoughts is what I term repeated simultaneous thought. This occurs when you and the person in question have the exact same thought at the same moment, often without any prior communication that could have triggered this thought. You're contemplating sending them a message, and they send you one. You're thinking about a specific location, and they mention it in your next conversation. You hear a song in your mind, and it appears on your screen. But here's what matters most. This doesn't happen just once. It occurs repeatedly. You begin noticing a pattern, where almost every time you're reflecting on something highly specific, the person independently expresses this thought. Once you start recognizing this pattern, it intensifies, because you're beginning to become aware of this level of connection. And this awareness allows the person to draw even closer to it. Jung would have called this the activation of a shared archetype. When two individuals resonate on similar frequencies, they begin accessing the same level of the collective unconscious, and therefore they receive the same thoughts, the same images, the same truths that emerge from the common foundation of human psyche. Individuals often rationalize this. They say it's coincidence, that it's because they have close friendship, that it's because they spend considerable time together. But if that were everything, it would happen to everyone who has close friendships, and it doesn't. This applies specifically to relationships where very deep psychological synchronization exists. The second indicator suggesting that someone is calling you with their thoughts is what I term compulsive appearance in thoughts. This occurs when the person appears in your thoughts in a manner you cannot control, almost in an obsessive way. You're doing something completely different, concentrating on another subject, and suddenly this person appears in your mind, as if drawing your attention through an invisible thread. There's something highly specific about this appearance. It's not just a casual emergence where you think about someone who was there. It's an appearance that seems forced, that seems to come from outside, that feels as if the person is literally calling you in a way you cannot rationally explain. Many individuals experience this and attempt to suppress this thought. They try concentrating on other matters, but the more they attempt to suppress it, the more the person appears, because that person, through their intention, through the intensity of their thoughts about you, creates a resonance so powerful you cannot ignore it. Jung would have expressed clearly that the compulsive occurrence of someone in your thoughts is evidence that this person is thinking about you very intensely. This intense thought, especially if it carries strong emotions, creates a wave in psychological reality that you can feel even without any consciously expressed communication. Write resonance in the comments if you intimately know this compulsive feeling of foreign presence. The third indicator confirming that someone is calling you with their thoughts is what I term synchronicity in numbers. You begin repeatedly seeing specific numbers. It might be the time on the clock you glance at. It might be a number in an address. It might be a phone number appearing on your screen. This number appears so frequently that you stop being able to believe it's coincidence. This number often has a highly specific connection with the person. It might be an important date for both of you. It might be a number the person frequently mentions. It might be a number that holds personal meaning for you both, or the number might be someone's birth date. It might be a number that appears in the person's life in ways you'll discover only later. It might be a code connecting you two in ways you cannot fully articulate. The language of synchronicity is functioning here. The universe, through numbers, confirms that the person is thinking about you, that you're interconnected in a manner transcending rational explanation. The more attention you give these numbers, the more they appear, because you're becoming more receptive to the transmitted message. Look, I know this might sound very mystical, or even like you're just imagining patterns when nothing is there, but bear with me. I promise this will make perfect sense momentarily. The fourth indicator suggesting that someone is calling you with their thoughts is what I term synchronized awakening. You suddenly wake in the middle of the night, and at that moment, or within several minutes, the person sends you a message. Or you wake from a vivid dream about the person, and when you look at your phone, there's confirmation that the person was thinking about you at that moment. Sleep is a state where the conscious mind is quieted, where the psychic barriers we maintain while awake dissolve, and therefore, it's a state where we're most receptive to psychic communications. When you wake suddenly without apparent reason, or when you wake from a particularly intense dream about a specific person, and that person contacts you at that precise moment, this isn't random. It's a synchronized awakening, evidence that your psyches were communicating while you were both in vulnerable states. This indicator is particularly powerful because it occurs during a period when your rational defenses are lowered, when you cannot deny what you're feeling or dismiss it as wishful thinking or projection. The fifth indicator, the most powerful of all, is what I term validated emotional telepathy. This occurs when you experience a very specific emotion that doesn't seem to originate from your own circumstances, and then you discover that the person was experiencing that exact emotion at that precise moment. You feel inexplicable sadness without anything in your life justifying it, and later you learn that the person was going through a difficult moment at that exact time. You feel unexpected joy without apparent reason, and you discover that something wonderful happened to the person precisely when you felt that surge of happiness. This emotional telepathy is the clearest proof that you're functioning on a shared plane of consciousness, because emotions are more primal than thoughts, more difficult to fake or rationalize, And when you receive someone's emotions without them expressing them, you're experiencing direct psychic communication. Jung would have stated that emotional telepathy represents the purest form of synchronicity, because it demonstrates that two psyches aren't merely thinking about each other, but are actually feeling together, experiencing together, living the same psychological reality despite physical separation. These 5 indicators, when they appear repeatedly in your relationship with someone, aren't isolated coincidences. They're evidence of a psychic bond functioning at a level most individuals never experience in their entire existence. They're proof that consciousness isn't confined to individual skulls, but can extend, connect, communicate in ways that conventional science still refuses to acknowledge, but that human experience continuously validates. Now, here's what's crucial to understand. When these indicators appear in your experience, your first instinct might be to dismiss them, to rationalize them away, to convince yourself you're imagining things. This dismissal is a defense mechanism, because acknowledging this level of connection requires accepting that reality functions in ways far more mysterious and complex than we were taught. But every time you dismiss these indicators, you're closing yourself off from a dimension of experience that could profoundly enrich your understanding of yourself and your connections with others. The question isn't whether these phenomena are real. Human beings across all cultures and throughout all of history have reported these experiences. The question is whether you're willing to acknowledge them when they appear in your own life. Jung spent decades studying these phenomena precisely because he recognized that they revealed something fundamental about human consciousness. He understood that synchronicity wasn't an aberration or an anomaly, but a natural feature of how consciousness operates when we're deeply connected to someone. The more you deny these experiences, the more you cut yourself off from valuable information about your psychological reality. But when you begin acknowledging them, when you start paying attention to these indicators, they intensify. Not because you're creating them through wishful thinking, but because your awareness makes you more receptive to what was always occurring. This is crucial to understand because many individuals fear that if they acknowledge these experiences, they'll start seeing patterns everywhere. They'll become delusional. But actually, the opposite occurs. When you acknowledge genuine synchronicity, you become better at distinguishing between real psychic communication and projection or wishful thinking. You develop discernment. You learn to feel the difference between a thought that originates from your own desires and a thought that arrives from outside, from someone else's consciousness reaching toward yours. And this discernment is what allows you to navigate these experiences with integrity, to honor them without becoming consumed by them, to recognize when someone is genuinely calling you psychically and when you're simply hoping they are. Now, let me share something that will help you understand why these particular 5 indicators are the most reliable evidence of psychic calling. Each of these indicators involves an element that you cannot control or manipulate through conscious thought alone. Repeated simultaneous thought requires the other person to independently express the same thought you're having. Compulsive appearance in thoughts involves an experience that feels forced upon you, not chosen. Synchronicity in numbers involves external manifestations in your environment. Synchronized awakening requires timing that cannot be manufactured consciously. Validated emotional telepathy requires confirmation from the other person about their emotional state. In each case, there's external validation, something that confirms you're not simply imagining the connection. This external validation is what distinguishes genuine synchronicity from wishful thinking or projection. Jung emphasized this aspect of synchronicity repeatedly. True synchronicity always involves meaningful coincidence between an internal state and an external event. It's never just internal. There's always something in external reality that corresponds to and validates the internal experience. This is why these 5 indicators are so powerful. They're not subjective experiences that exist only in your mind. They're experiences that can be verified, that involve the other person's independent actions or statements, that leave traces in external reality. When you experience these indicators, you're not losing touch with reality. You're actually perceiving a deeper layer of reality that most individuals miss because they're too focused on surface appearances. And here's where this gets truly profound. When you begin recognizing these indicators in your relationship with someone, You're not just passively observing a connection that exists. You're actually strengthening that connection through your awareness. Consciousness, Jung understood, isn't passive. It's active. It participates in reality. When two individuals both become aware of their psychic connection, when they both start recognizing and honoring the synchronicities that appear, the connection deepens and the synchronicities multiply. This is because awareness creates receptivity. When you're aware that someone might be reaching out to you psychically, you become more attuned to subtle signals, more open to receiving what they're transmitting. And when they sense this receptivity in you, even unconsciously, they become more likely to reach out, creating a positive feedback loop. But this only works when the connection is genuine. You cannot create synchronicity through wishful thinking. You can only recognize it when it's actually occurring. And this is the safeguard against delusion. If you're trying to force synchronicity, trying to see patterns where none exist, external reality won't validate your internal experience. The other person won't independently confirm what you're feeling. The external events won't align with your internal state. But when the connection is real, when someone genuinely is calling you psychically, external reality does validate your experience, again and again, in ways that cannot be explained by chance alone. And this repeated external validation is what allows you to trust your experience, to honor what you're feeling without doubting your sanity. Now, I want to address something that many individuals struggle with when they begin recognizing these indicators. There's often a sense of vulnerability that comes with acknowledging psychic connection, a feeling of exposure, as if by admitting that you're experiencing these phenomena, you're revealing something intimate about yourself. This vulnerability is real, and it's important to honor it. Psychic connection is intimate. It involves allowing yourself to be permeable to another consciousness, to receive their thoughts and emotions, to acknowledge that the boundaries between self and other aren't as solid as we typically believe. But this vulnerability is also precisely what makes these connections so valuable. When you can be truly open to someone at this level, when you can allow them into your psychic space and they can allow you into theirs, you experience a form of intimacy that transcends anything possible through words or physical presence alone. This is the intimacy that souls crave, the connection that satisfies at the deepest level, because it involves being seen and known, not just at the level of personality or behavior, but at the level of essence, at the level of who you truly are, beneath all social masks and conscious presentations. And when you find this level of connection with someone, when you recognize through these 5 indicators that they're calling you psychically and you're calling them back, you've found something precious, something that most individuals search for their entire lives without ever experiencing. The question then becomes what you do with this recognition, because awareness without action can be frustrating. If you recognize that someone is calling you psychically, but you don't respond, if you acknowledge the connection but don't honor it through some form of action or communication, you create a split within yourself. Part of you knows the connection is real, but another part of you is denying it or refusing to engage with it. And this split creates psychological tension, a sense of incompleteness, a feeling that you're not living authentically. So, when you recognize these indicators, when you acknowledge that someone is genuinely reaching out to you psychically, the question becomes how to respond with integrity. Sometimes the appropriate response is to reach out directly, to initiate contact, to acknowledge the connection openly with the person. Other times, especially if circumstances are complex, the appropriate response might be to acknowledge the connection internally, to honor it through your thoughts and intentions, even if external action isn't currently appropriate. But what's crucial is that you don't dismiss the experience, that you don't pretend it's not happening. Because every time you dismiss genuine synchronicity, you're fragmenting yourself, creating a split between what you know at a deep level and what you're willing to acknowledge consciously. And this fragmentation has psychological costs. It makes you doubt your perceptions. It makes you question your intuition. It disconnects you from your own psychic capacities, from your ability to perceive and respond to subtle realities. The individuals who navigate these experiences most successfully are those who develop the courage to acknowledge what they're experiencing, while maintaining discernment about how to respond. They don't act impulsively on every synchronicity, but they don't dismiss them either. They hold the experiences with respect, allow them to inform their understanding of their connections, and make conscious choices about how to engage. This balanced approach, this combination of openness and discernment, is what allows individuals to benefit from their psychic capacities without becoming overwhelmed by them or using them to avoid dealing with practical realities. And this is the path I'm inviting you to explore. Not a path of abandoning reason or rationality, but a path of expanding your understanding to include dimensions of experience that reason alone cannot fully explain. A path of honoring your psychic perceptions while maintaining your grounding in practical reality. A path of recognizing that consciousness is far more expansive and interconnected than materialist science acknowledges, while still maintaining your critical thinking and discernment. This is what Jung meant by individuation, by becoming whole. It's not about choosing between rational consciousness and psychic awareness. It's about integrating both, allowing them to inform each other, creating a more complete understanding of yourself and your place in a reality that is simultaneously material and psychic, physical and spiritual, individual and interconnected. When you walk this path, when you begin recognizing and honoring the synchronicities in your relationships, you're not just improving your connections with specific individuals, you're actually transforming your relationship with reality itself. You're moving from a worldview where consciousness is isolated and disconnected to a worldview where consciousness is relational and interconnected. And this shift in worldview changes everything. It changes how you make decisions because you're no longer relying solely on rational analysis, but also consulting your intuitive knowing. It changes how you relate to others because you're more attuned to subtle communications, more receptive to what people are transmitting beyond their words. It changes your sense of possibility because you recognize that reality is more flexible and responsive to consciousness than you previously believed. This is the transformation that occurs when you truly embrace the reality of synchronicity, when you stop dismissing your psychic experiences and start honoring them as valid sources of information about your reality. And I want to emphasize that this isn't about becoming New Age or abandoning critical thinking. Jung was a scientist, a psychiatrist, someone deeply committed to rigorous observation and analysis. But he was also someone who refused to dismiss experiences simply because they didn't fit into conventional scientific frameworks. He recognized that genuine science requires following evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads to conclusions that challenge prevailing assumptions. And the evidence he gathered throughout his career, from his own experiences and from the experiences of hundreds of patients, convinced him that psychic phenomena are real, that consciousness operates in ways that transcend individual brains, that meaningful connection between individuals involves dimensions that conventional psychology ignores. And now, decades after Jung's work, we have even more evidence. We have quantum physics showing that reality at its most fundamental level doesn't operate according to classical mechanical laws, that observation affects reality, that particles that were once connected remain connected across any distance. We have research in parapsychology documenting phenomena that cannot be explained by current scientific models. We have countless first-person reports from individuals across all cultures describing experiences of telepathy, synchronicity, and psychic connection. The evidence is overwhelming for anyone willing to examine it fairly, but most individuals don't examine it because acknowledging it would require revising their entire worldview, questioning assumptions they've held their entire lives, admitting that reality is far stranger and more mysterious than they were taught. But for those who do examine this evidence, for those who have the courage to acknowledge their own psychic experiences and the integrity to investigate them honestly, a new world opens up. A world where connection is deeper, where meaning is richer, where possibility is greater than materialist science ever imagined. This is the world I'm inviting you to explore through recognizing these 5 indicators of psychic calling. Not a world of fantasy or delusion, but a world of expanded awareness, where you're honoring dimensions of experience that have always been present, but that you may have been trained to dismiss. And as you explore this world, as you begin recognizing when someone is calling you psychically and learning to respond with integrity, you'll discover capacities within yourself that you may not have known existed. You'll discover that you can perceive far more than your 5 physical senses reveal. You'll discover that you can communicate in ways that transcend language. you'll discover that you're connected to others and to reality itself in ways that are simultaneously intimate and vast. This discovery isn't the end of a journey, it's the beginning. Because once you recognize that psychic connection is real, once you acknowledge your own psychic capacities, the question becomes how deep you're willing to go, how fully you're willing to develop these capacities, how courageously you're willing to live in alignment with what you perceive. And this is where most individuals hesitate, because acknowledging psychic experience is one thing, fully embracing it, allowing it to reshape your life, having the courage to act on what you perceive, even when it challenges social norms or personal comfort, that requires a different level of commitment. But for those who make this commitment, for those who decide to honor their psychic perceptions and live accordingly, life becomes infinitely richer. Connections deepen, meaning expands, synchronicities multiply, and you begin experiencing yourself not as an isolated consciousness trapped in a physical body, but as a node in a vast network of interconnected awareness. Touching and being touched by other consciousnesses in ways that create beauty, meaning, and transformation. This is what's possible when you stop dismissing your psychic experiences and start honoring them. This is the life that awaits when you recognize that someone calling you with their thoughts isn't fantasy, but reality. This is the transformation that occurs when you acknowledge the 5 indicators I've shared and allow them to inform how you navigate your most meaningful connections. If you want to continue exploring these dimensions of consciousness and connection, stay engaged with this content. Each piece builds on the previous, revealing another layer of the psychological reality that governs our deepest connections, that creates life-transforming synchronicities, revelations that transform not only how you perceive other people, but also how you perceive yourself as a being capable of receiving psychological transmissions, capable of communicating without words, capable of loving through dimensions that transcend physical reality. Come and become part of this community of individuals who have dared to recognize synchronicity in their lives, to honor the psychological promptings they receive, and to live in connection with a reality far broader than what the rational mind can grasp. Individuals who understood that genuine connection begins when you stop doubting what you feel and start honoring that feeling as the most reliable information you can receive. What comes afterward, when you continue on this path of recognizing synchronicity and honoring psychological connections, can literally reorient your life to be in alignment with those individuals you psychically call and who call you back. Because when you finally see the reality of the calling, you can respond with intention, with clarity, with the same psychological presence being offered to you. Now I must share with you something that few individuals can express. The psychological calling you experience isn't an isolated or random phenomenon. In actuality, it's the result of a very deep resonance that formed through interactions between 2 souls who recognize each other at levels transcending time, space, and even conscious memory. When Jung explored the concept of synchronicity, he was attempting to describe a reality that conventional science cannot measure, but that human experience repeatedly confirms, that between conscious beings there exists a connection independent of physical proximity. 2 individuals who are truly interconnected at the soul level can influence each other through pure thought, through crystalline intention, through presence that transcends the 5 senses. The 13th indicator, which extends this understanding further, is what I term synchronicity of opportunity. You begin receiving precisely those opportunities you need to be close to the person or to be at the right place at the right time, where the person will also be. It's not that you plan to be there. It's that life conspires to guide you 2 together in ways that seem impossible to be coincidences. The perfect job appears precisely in the city where the person lives. The course you always wanted to take is offered during the same period when you'll be in the same area where the person is traveling. A mutual friend suddenly suggests a trip to precisely the location that you and the person often imagined visiting together. These opportunities aren't random. They're life responding to the calling you both emit through psychological intention. Because reality isn't fixed, isn't rigid. Reality is malleable and responds to consciousness. 2 consciousnesses vibrating on the same frequency can shape reality in ways that align it with their shared desires. Indicator number 14 is what I term spontaneous bodily reactions. You begin having very physical reactions when the person is thinking about you, even when they're miles away. You might feel your heartbeat accelerating without apparent reason. You might feel chills down your spine. You might feel burning lips. You might experience dizziness or spinning sensation. These reactions have no ordinary medical explanation. You're not ill. You're not stressed. Your body is simply reacting to a message being transmitted to you on a psychological level. Your body can detect this message long before your rational mind can process it. Jung understood that the body can be much more honest than the mind when it comes to the truth about connection. Because while the mind questions, the body knows. The body can feel the truth of presence, even when separated by distance. Indicator number 15 is what I term verifiable shared dreams. You have a very specific dream about the person, a dream containing very unusual or very specific details. Then, when you manage to speak with the person, you discover they had practically an identical dream on the same night, or a night very close to yours. This shared dream experience is one of the clearest proofs that you two are functioning on a shared level of psychological reality, because dreams originate from the unconscious, from a place where the censorship of the conscious mind cannot function. When two unconscious minds synthesize in this way, they can actually meet in the same dream space. These encounters in the dream world are very real for those who experience them, and often are far more revealing than any communication occurring in the conscious state, because they come without defense mechanisms, without masks, without the need for protection that exists when you're awake. Indicator number 16 is what I term inexplicable guilt. You feel deep guilt for the thoughts you have about the person, as if you were doing something wrong by allowing this person to fill space in your mind in this way. This guilt is often accompanied by a feeling of intrusiveness, as if you were violating someone's psychic privacy by sending them your thoughts. But this guilt is often a sign that you're truly communicating with each other, because guilt arises when you feel you're doing something significant, when you feel you're having real impact. If it were just fantasy, there would be no reason to feel guilty. Indicator number 17 is what I term psychological anticipation. You know the person is about to arrive before they actually do. You feel a change in the energy around you. You feel the person approaching you even when there are no obvious signs this is happening, and then the person appears. Either you know the person is going to call you, and several minutes later they actually do, or you know the person is having a very intense thought or a very strong emotion, and when you manage to speak with them, you discover that's exactly what was happening at that moment. This psychological premonition is a very sophisticated form of attunement, where you can detect someone's energetic patterns before they manifest in material ways. Indicator number 18 is what I term substitute rejection. You cannot create any lasting connection with anyone other than the person, because your subconscious knows you're interconnected. You can initiate relationships, but there's always a part of you that remains reserved, that waits, that cannot fully commit, because your psyche knows you're devoted on another level. The individuals who try to be with you often sense this reservation. They perceive that part of you isn't completely there, that your psychological loyalty resides elsewhere. These individuals often conclude that you're unreachable, that you're imprisoned in spirit, that you're incapable of truly loving someone who is physically available. But in actuality, what's happening is that you're honoring a psychological connection that is very real and deep. Your soul refuses to compromise this truth for comfort or social conformity. By recognizing all these signals in your life, you can finally name and validate what you've always felt. You can stop questioning your sanity. You can stop feeling crazy or delusional. You can simply honor the truth that you're deeply connected with someone through means transcending rational explanation. This recognition is deeply liberating, because once you accept that this connection is real, you can make decisions about it with integrity. You can honestly decide whether you want to cultivate this connection or free yourself from it. But you're doing so with the knowledge that it's not a product of your imagination or your delusional tendencies. Write in the comments how many of these 18 indicators you ultimately counted in yourself. This is how the psyche truly functions at its deepest level.